So we're going to go from there to talking about tourbillons. So tourbillon, as you guys know, probably was patented in 1801 by Abraham Louis Breguet. It was a device to compensate for errors on the escapement and on the balance and on the hairspring when watches were in the vertical position. What are they doing in a wristwatch? Because a wristwatch is very rarely in a vertical position. It's, you know, let's face it, it's because they're cool looking. I mean, look at that. It's amazing looking, you know? It's funny because François Journe, who made this watch, is very fond of saying, putting a tourbillon on a wristwatch is like breaking your leg before running a race. He said, but of course he has to put a caveat in there that benefits him, which is to say, however, to have a remontoire, which is a self-arming system for constant force, as he has in his watch. That's like having a really marvelous cast on your leg, right? So tell us a little bit about that watch and how it charms you.
Well, this is a fantastic watch on two levels. First, because it is not easy to make a movement entirely in 18-karat rose gold. This is not something that existed in traditional horology. The ability to build a movement out of solid gold is an artifact of the modern era. And again, it's there because it's luxurious, it's beautiful, it's warm. Now the dial itself has a wonderful imprint known as the Regency imprint. The great thing about that being, once again, it is fatuous, but because it's fatuous, it is fabulous. A beautiful surround for the pièce de résistance.
That's good.
And then the tourbillon. Yes. Again, what purpose does it serve? Well, if it's a pocket watch in your pocket in one orientation with respect to gravity, helps to even out the effects of gravity on timing. But when it's moving in every which way, the effect is less pronounced, which is why modern evolutions of the tourbillon, such as this canted double tourbillon, it actually has two tourbillons, one moving in a 4-minute circuit, one moving in a 60-second circuit by Grubel-Forsey, reclaims some of the original chronometric purpose of the tourbillon.
Reapplied for the wristwatch. But then if you look at it, because you've got essentially these two axes around which the balance wheel is being driven, it starts to become less of a chronometric device and more sort of a mobile sculpture, you know? And I think that that's the charm of it as well. I mean, none of these watches have lost the essence of watchmaking in that they are ultimately there to tell time accurately. But they have sublimated that and sort of brought it to another level by bringing emotion into the game, and I think that making that the primary sort of attraction.
I would agree with that, because it's often important to be the best of the old style. For instance, why do we revere Secretariat? Because Secretariat was the highest level of breeding, excellence, and achievement in an old and romantic form of sport. Secretariat was the ultimate racehorse, slower than any car, but fantastic as the ultimate example of that type. This achieves that. Grubel-Forsey tourbillon watches have won timing competitions against mechanical competition.
Exactly.
So we have something that is both.
I think they won the second concourse, right?
That is
the first
fact.
one was won by Jaeger with the Master, which I know is one of your favorite watches, which beat the gyro.
Which beat their own gyro.
And then I think what I also liked also, because at some point all the guys at Grubel were being like, hey, listen, you guys claim to make the world's most accurate watch. You've done all this sort of achievement related to multiple axes for wristwatch tourbillons. When are you going to prove it to us? And so they did. They went to the Concours International de la Chronométrie and they won with one of their watches, and we have to sort of say chapeau to them.
Rick has a broad range of interests when it comes to watchmaking, and I think that he always tends to target things that are a little bit more esoteric, but that are also significant to the brand. And one of my, favorite watches that we have here today, I'm a big fan of all of them, is the 5960 with the black dial. So this is a annual calendar flyback chrono on a stainless steel bracelet. The first stainless steel of the 5960 series, the second iteration. But what's so significant about this watch is that they ended the series on the black dial, and that they produced this particular watch for less than a year. And so it's a very rare bird and not something that you see very often in the wild.
Yeah, Rick, they made this watch for only one model year, and it was actually only built for a few months. Did you pick it for its rarity, or did the black dial grab you?
I picked it for the black dial and the red chronograph hand, and on the first of the month, there's a red 1 date. And I just think that pops so much. I'm a dial aesthetics guy. Mm-hmm. First and foremost, it's dial to me, more than anything else. And I like the white dial version of that watch a great deal, but the black was available to me and more rare. And it's a watch that I wear a great deal. I like it a lot.
So you brought some really cool watches with you today that I'm sure people would love to see. So let's go through them all. First and foremost, you have what could be my single grail, either that or the Jade Dial TN. But tell us about the Ruby.
Yes, yeah. So always happy to share, George. So what I have on my wrist right now is the FP Journe tourbillon reference TN. So the second reference, his first reference was reference T. This is kind of the second generation and the last of the second generation. So the Ruby dial made with ruthenium subdials was made in a limited edition of 20 to wish the TN farewell and to introduce the tourbillon vertical,
right,
which is the current production reference. I do have it on a platinum bracelet, giving it a nice weight to it, but a very special piece. Every piece is going to be unique because of the stone. Based on my discussions with FP himself, this is the most complicated dial he's ever made. It's been a complete headache for him. A lot of error rates to it, and it's questionable whether he will ever do a Ruby dial again. That's how complicated this one was.
Right, it was that difficult for them to produce. I know a lot of their dials are difficult to produce, even down to like the Chronometra Blue. I believe the success rate is 20% on that. So, and I love that he just never compromises anything. He has a very high standard, and if it's not what he wants it to be, he just doesn't do it. That's why he didn't come out with the QP for 4 years, because it wasn't snapping like he wanted it to. And I like that he'll never settle.
I have to just admit to the audience that my favorite Moser is still the Endeavour Perpetual. It's a dress watch. It's mostly made in precious metals. It's still my favorite. I feel like it's the heart and soul of the brand. Do you have a personal favorite model or variant in the lineup?
To be honest, the Perpetual, the Perpetual 1 historically was the name of the watch, but the Endeavour Perpetual Calendar Funky Blue was for me the watch that I would say, if I had to pick, there's tons of them that I really love, but I think that was the moment where I realized what I wanted to do with the brand. That was probably 12 months into being the helm. What was interesting, it was the same watch that had been sold before, but by bringing this fumé, funky color and the kudu band, suddenly something that was very elegant and traditional, but a little bit dusty, like my grandfather would wear it, became like a modern watch. And that's where I realized that's why Moser is there. I think we're an independent small brand, but we cannot do what MB&F or Zeitwerk or the Betun do. We need to do something that is us, and that's playing on this 1828 heritage, but staying modern. And that's where everything became more easy.
And certainly, the colors you've used and the fades that you've used on the fumé dials have become a signature of Moser, widely copied in the industry, and something that people almost expect now across the model lines, even on dress watches. Could you walk me through how those dials are made? It must be a galvanic process, but how long does it take? How many steps are there? It seems like something that would be rather complicated.
Yeah, so we say there's about 200 steps if you consider if you put the indexes and facets and everything. But the main, and we can send you a movie to illustrate it. But the main, I would say, elements is really the preparation of the brass dial, creating the sunburst, which is basically the dial is rotating and you have a brush that is vertical, it's turning, and the other one is turning like this, and then you create the sunburst effect. Then you have a galvanic bars to create the base color. Blue, red, green, whatever. And then there's another rotation element on the machine, which is the secret machine that is not so secret anymore, which is our fumé effect. So basically the dial is rotating and you spray on a certain angle and at a certain speed, a darker color or a wider color, depends what effect you want to have. And then the paint just drifts on the side and creates this gradient, and then you have the zapponnage, and then depends what kind of logo you want to put or the indexes, and then it's a pretty long process, and anything happening in the middle would make it a defect dial, a small dust, a small. But it's fun sometimes to have defect dials. So usually when they screw it up with the color, that's when we create our special editions. And we had many cases where they're like, oh no, it didn't come out as expected. I'm like, oh, don't throw it away, just give it to us and we'll find something to do with it. And that's how we came up with the Arctic Blue. We had some purple colors that came out that was just not what we wanted, but that makes those small collections pretty sexy.
Yeah, it's like a defect on a stamp. It's more collectible, not less collectible.
Yeah, exactly.
This watch is dial dominant. Normally, it's not good to have wood in public, but in this case, we'll make an exception. The white birch dial was inspired by the Shirakawa birch that exists outside of the Shizuku Ishii studio in Iwate Prefecture, where this watch is made. And it is a lovely thing, depending on how you count the steps involved in its production. It takes up to 20 individual steps in the process of creating the white birch watch face. Externally, we have a 40mm watch that's fairly thin at just under 12mm, so I would describe this as a handsome all-arounder, neither sports watch nor dress watch, but a judicious blend of both. The case features creases and curves, satin and polish, and you can see that polish is the famed Zaratsu tin plate polish, originally of European origin on Zalitz machines, but the foremost practitioners today are at Seiko and Grand Seiko in Japan. This is true artisanal watchmaking, with the craft requiring up to 3 years to master. So with a handcrafted dial and a handcrafted case, this is very much a handcrafted watch. By the way, a little bit of clarification. This watch launched as part of the Heritage Collection. It was later moved to the new and cool Evolution 9 series. The more you know.
As controversial as it was, Söhne did not stop or get discouraged by mixed reactions, and only a year later actually dropped another bomb, which I deem to be the finest Söhne watch ever made, the Phantom. The real treat with Zeitwerk Lumen is unquestionably the dial. Its ancestor was a home run in itself, a cool watch from Lange for the first time, but somehow it got even cooler. To me, this is the most badass and defined watch ever created by Lange actually. According to Tony De Haas, the idea came at night while trying to read the time on the Zeitwerk. Alas, no one cannot, simply because Zeitwerk has no lume spots. The only possible solution was to lume up the discs. However, since the discs change frequently, 60 seconds for the minute disc, 10 minutes for the decimal and so on, there was no time to charge up to lume. Thereby the idea of charging the discs while they are hidden beneath the smoke sapphire arrived. The smoky sapphire glass acts as a reversed sunglass and allows only UV rays to pass. As the superluminova charges throughout the day with the UV, it creates an enticing glow in the dark. The German silver time bridge is coated in black, creates a very strong visual harmony. Especially at night with the lume coming alive, the contrast between the black and green is a sight to behold.
Something I thought was a very interesting modern innovation is making these things work but lighter, and this is also something that in cars has been intrinsic to enjoyment, performance, kind of you name it. I believe it was Chapman who said, add lightness. And Richard Mille historically has done some incredibly interesting things complication-wise, and there are merits to what they've done. I recognize that there's some marketing and hype base there, but something that they did with the 6702 was make it at least at that time, the lightest automatic watch, period. And that was just really interesting to me. I really appreciate the NTPT technology. I'm generally surrounded by carbon fiber and all sorts of other high-tech materials, lightweight, strong, high-tech materials, and the layering that NTPT is comprised of just was really cool to me. And I've been a McLaren person for quite some time as well. So when the 6702 came out, it was really the first Richard Mille that I was like, this is absolutely amazing. And I ended up with one of my friends working for the company in New York, and he also came from a racing background. He was an engineer with one of the teams, and awesome guy, and he said, you've got to come in and check some of this stuff out. So I go in, I actually tried on one of their NTPT tourbillons, and I was already blown away at how it felt, because historically we kind of have this, if the watch is heavier, it's made better, or it's worth more, kind of whatever. And I put this thing on, and it was the coolest thing of having this unbelievably light piece of machinery on a wrist, and it just feels like this. You could wear it playing tennis, you can wear it in anything, and you just wouldn't think about it.
So now we are at the 10th anniversary, we have the LMX, and this is a celebration, by far the longest power reserve you've ever had in a legacy machine.
Yes.
And I mean, the watch is larger than life, but there's a lot to it. Could you talk a little bit about what makes this 10th anniversary watch different, other than the power reserve, which is monumental at 7 days? It's really a celebration of everything you've done in the last 10 years.
In legacy machine. So the idea was we go back to the source, to LM1, and we basically put it on steroids. What would we do today if we were going to create an LM1? The 2 time zones remain the same, but they become now at 50 degrees because it's much more 3-dimensional. The 3 barrels bring 7-day power reserve instead of 1 barrel, which is 45 hours. The fact that what people love, and me the first, is typically on the Perpetual calendar, is you see part of the components, and not only the simple bridge. So you have the hours and minutes wheels in front, of course the escapement in front, and the 3-dimensional power reserve indicator, which is not only now like this, but it actually rotates on itself. At the end of the winding up, it doesn't block like any hand winding movement. You've got a system which then a débraye, which like a clutch, opens it up, and you continue turning, and the whole indicator turns on itself. Therefore, you can decide, there's one side written Sunday to Monday, and the other one which is 1 to 7, and you decide which way you want to see it. We use the aesthetics of the Thunderdome or the Flying T, which gave us much more height to work with. Even the watch is not thicker than an LM Perpetual. It looks much thicker, but the case is super thin, and the rest is sapphire. So it's got this feel of, always think of the city of Atlantis. When I was a kid, you always imagined that there was the city of Atlantis underwater, under a dome, and you see that little city, and it's really a little city when you look at it. And when I wear an LMX, people lose me. I'm like, oh, God, you see all the different details, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what watchmaking should be, at least for me.